today I stumbled on something that I quite literally do not remember Watchtower doing at any point in their history, ever. Which is a real head scratcher because Watchtower is the masters of rinse and repeating, and it makes me feel like they might be cooking up something massive. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally, and today we are looking at a new Watchtower that just dropped today. But we're going to be looking at the context of the Watchtower because those are fascinating. But we're also going to be looking at what is not there as well. And quickly, before we get into it, don't forget to drop a like on the video. It helps it get out to more people on YouTube. And I am really curious what you guys think about what this all could mean. So comment down below what your sort of tinfoil hat conspiracy theories are, because there's something brewing here. I'm just not quite 100% sure. Don't worry, I'll have my wild speculation as well. And also subscribe to the channel if you want to see the rest of the convention videos and further updates on what's going on with the goofballs that are Jehovah's Witnesses. With all of that being said, let's do this. So first off, what was so baffling? Well, I was looking at this new Watchtower and then I just went through the little catalog and I noticed that there was a missing Watchtower. The August 2024 didn't exist. It went from July straight to September. And I went back all the way in their entire history and they have never, and I mean never, missed a single Watchtower. So what's going on here? So then I was like, okay, well, what are the dates that they're studying this? Well, it's going to be around October. Now, for anyone to the uninitiated, October is really significant in Jehovah's Witness lore. They think all of the great events in the world always happen in October for whatever reason or another. Whenever they've made doomsday predictions, they never say it's going to happen in January. It's like, well, it'll probably happen in October. So October is very significant for them. Also, this will be right after their annual meeting. The annual meeting is like a showcase for Jehovah's Witnesses where they make big changes, announcements, and the like. So, what the heck is going on here? Why did they skip a Watchtower? Now, my first thought is ZZ's in my face. My second thought was, do they do this every year and I just have never noticed? Or have I noticed and forgotten? Those two things could be very likely. But I would hazard a guess that I would have been aware of this at some point before. I would have remembered it. So, what is going on with all of this? Well, my sort of hypothesis is that they're going to be announcing something huge. Big changes at this year's annual meeting, which wouldn't be like the craziest thing ever. That's generally where they do it. But this is so big that they're trying to not let Jehovah's Witnesses get a sneak peek of it. Is this something they do? Perhaps, and I've just never noticed. Whatever the case is, I don't recall. So I went through the year's text because I thought, if they were to drop a little cookie crumb or they're trying to give an indication or sort of mentally prep people for something that they might be talking about, that would be the place to look. And I settled in on this one here, which was the Saturday, October 19th. And Sunday, October 20th. Now, again, I don't have my tinfoil hat. I guess I should go put it on just to keep the lore alive. All right, well, we are all set for Wally's crazy predictions that I'm going to make with, again, this is all speculation. I don't really know. I also do think it's funny that there were a lot of rumors. I got so many DMs and emails talking about whispers going on around Bethel about all sorts of big changes that were going to be coming involving the Jubilee year, this, that, and the third. Again, all of that was unsubstantiated. I couldn't prove any of it, so I don't really know what to think about all of that business. Sorry if I keep looking over. ZZ's trying to do something that looks a little dangerous and destructive, but he's a cat. I'm sure he'll be fine. Anyway, let's look at these articles. Or not the articles, but these daily texts. So the one on October 19th. This one curiously mentions not listening to anyone that is critical of Watchtower. There's one sentence here. This means that we do not listen to or read anything from apostates. We realize that if we are not careful, we could easily develop a critical spirit and begin to doubt Jehovah and the direction we receive through his organization. To avoid such a course, can we ask ourselves, do I usually have something negative to say when we receive new direction or explanations? Am I inclined to find fault with those taking the lead? When we are quick to correct these tendencies in ourselves, Jehovah will be pleased with us. Wouldn't that be a perfect primer for a big change that was going to happen on Sunday, October 20th, which is in the time frame of our missing Watchtower? So for those of you that don't know what this is, they have this little booklet, or they can go on their app on their phone, and it's called the Daily Text. And it's just something that they want Jehovah's Witnesses to think about throughout the day, a little spiritual thought for Jehovah's Witnesses' pleasure. Now, when they're doing this, they're sort of like mentally prepping themselves, and meditating on something throughout the day. So it's a little bit curious that on this specific day, October 19th, that they are talking about not listening to apostates, and there's also this missing Watchtower that would cover that date. So logically, I was like, well, what does that Sunday daily text talk about? Well, it talks about a scripture in Ezekiel about how people would be hard-headed in their territory, and preaching to them would be difficult because they would be very stubborn. But Jehovah wanted them to do their preaching work anyway, despite their stubbornness. So, what is my speculation here? Again, all just my opinion. There's no reason to put any stock in this claim whatsoever. This is just me being a goofball. But I would hazard a guess that we might be on the precipice of them doing the unthinkable, going full-blown cult mode, and switching from a message of hope and peace to a message of judgment. Now, this is something that is like some deep Jehovah's Witness lore, so bear with me just for a second. So, as you know, Jehovah's Witnesses, they're iconic for preaching, knocking on people's doors, as I call it, doomsdaying. Well, they're not really doomsday because they're just like, hey, you better join us before Armageddon. But they have consistently talked about a time when this message of peace and happiness would actually shift and change into a message of essentially judgment, of like, ooh, man, the end is super duper ultra close. It's about to happen. Too bad, too bad. Now, I thought that maybe they weren't going to be doing this because of the adjustment we had at last year's annual meeting, where they basically said that even after the governments of this world turn on all religions, that people, once they saw that sign, once they saw that evidence, they could make a last-second conversion. So I thought, well, they're not really going to be doing this, but I'm putting the old tinfoil hat back on, and we're going to let it ride. So that's my prediction. Sometime at the annual meeting, there's going to be either a clarification of what that judgment message would mean, because it does kind of contradict that last-second conversion thing. So I'm thinking they're going to try and weasel their way out of their self-made contradiction, and that's probably that, in my opinion, is what's going to happen. So comment down below what you think is going on with all of this, because I find it fascinating to try and see what sort of like machinations are going on behind the scenes at Watchtower HQ that's causing them to do these very strange behaviors. Anyway, tinfoil hat off, and that's what I got, at least for that portion. Now let's actually talk about this article, because there are a few interesting things in it. So first off, we must discuss the elephant in the room, and by the elephant, I mean that I'm upset that Kim Silvio got a tacit little nod before I did in an actual Watchtower. This little girl's holding an elephant, and that is her little logo for her channel, so I'm pretty upset. She beat me to it, but hey, shout outs to you. I guess Australians with funny accents get to win. I don't know what's so wrong with being American or whatever. All jokes aside, there is an interesting picture in this article as well. And this has a man with a beard, obviously a Jehovah's Witness that's being absorbed in his Bible reading. Obviously, that's what the rain is all about. Got to let that really seep deep into your heart. Seep deep. That sounds... I probably shouldn't make that joke.
Wow, that is really hard. You really think you can go all day long? Well, You always left me satisfied and smiling, so.
That's what she said.
Anyway, the reason why this is so important is because Watchtower has a long history of showing the transformation of someone that was not a Jehovah's Witness and becoming a Jehovah's Witness. And one of the key features that they would show, especially in pictures and videos, is someone would have a beard, and then whenever they get to the Kingdom Hall, they're always clean shaven. Now, obviously, for time's sake, I'm not just going to have a montage of like 100 different examples, but here is my personal favorite because it is so on the nose.
That brother faithfully came up there for the next 2 years, every Friday night. He thought that it'd be a good idea to have a theocratic ministry school, so he got it approved. He would do the #1 talk, and the other brother that would come with him would do the highlights, and then the 3 of us inmates would do the other parts. I was given a talk every week. He started making tape recordings of the meetings. I'd listen to them over and over until the next week. I knew that if I was going to return to Jehovah, I had to make some adjustments. With Jehovah's help, I leaned on him more, relied on his strength more. It was then that I really felt that I could do this. The beard became a goatee, and then it just became a mustache. No drugs, no alcohol, no smoking, clean up my language. Then I finally got released.
So they literally have all of the hair falling into the sink, showing, yep, this is how you become a Jehovah's Witness. You shave that beard. So this is a pretty historic Watchtower just for that reason alone, that they have a Jehovah's Witness with a full-on beard. So yeehaw, I guess, for this guy, he will be immortalized for time and memorial. Immortalized for time and memorial. That sentence doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but we're going to stick with it. Any hoozles. Now, in another article talking about a letter to help us endure faithfully to the end, we have this sort of breakdown of a letter, the book of Hebrews, and how it can benefit Christians and developing to Christian maturity. Mostly just a bunch of Watchtower gobbledygook, but when I did read this, I was able to cook something up in my mind from this book. I was trying to make a little rhyme there. It didn't go very well, but hey, we're in paragraph 7. Like the Hebrew Christians, we are confronted by information and reasonings that go against Jehovah's righteous standards. Opposers often attack our Bible-based beliefs on morality, claiming that we are intolerant and cruel. The attitudes and opinions of the world are becoming ever more distant from God's perfect view of matters. We therefore must strengthen our ability to identify and reject ideas that opposers use in an attempt to discourage us or even lead us astray. Now, this is kind of on the nose, at least in my opinion, because when they talk about the world's opinions on morality, and how Jehovah's Witnesses are cruel or intolerant, they're usually referring to matters concerning the LGBTQ people. Now, Watchtower they're straight up, they're bigots. We have heard them talk so terribly about anyone that is not just like a straight person. And if you are outside of that bubble, then you are evil, you're deplorable, you're detestable to God. All of these horrible things, even to the point where they try and teach their own children that, hey, maybe if you preach to gay people could change and then they get to go to paradise as well. I don't know if you remember that, but here's a reminder.
Look, Mom. I drew our family in school today.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have time to finish Caleb's face. Carrie drew 2 mommies. She told me they're married to each other. My teacher says that all that matters is that people love each other and that they're happy.
Well, people have their own ideas about what is right and wrong. But what matters is how Jehovah feels. At Matthew 7:13 and 14, it talks about the road leading to paradise. To get there, Jehovah says we have to leave some things behind. That means anything Jehovah doesn't approve of.
But I want everyone to get to paradise.
So does Jehovah. And you know what? People can change. That's why we share his message. So, what can you say to Carrie?
Well, I could tell her about the paradise. I could tell her about the animals and the resurrection.
That's awesome!
Now, anytime I bring this up on the channel, there is a number of comments that always get made. And there'll be a number of comments on this video about this very thing. And people will say, hey, the Bible is pretty clear about homosexuality. It doesn't really mince its words. It's not right in God's eyes. I hear you, and you are correct. It doesn't mince words whatsoever. But let me just break something down for you to think about. I'm not trying to change your mind, because only you can change your mind. So just listen with open ears and a warm cup of me kicking my keyboard and making a bunch of noise. So you have a situation where the Bible is explicit, saying that, you know, it's bad to be a homosexual. Men who lie with men, stone them to death, not inherit God's kingdom, whatever the case is. You also have portions of the Bible where it condones slavery, or not eating shrimp, or mixing fabrics together so you can't wear your golf shorts and your tennis shirt. It has a lot of different rules that we don't take that seriously, or you, a Christian believer that says, hey, the Bible says this, don't take seriously. Oh, but Wally, you're just talking about the Old Testament. We don't go by that anymore. Jesus changed everything, the new law covenant. And think about it. He made those rules for a barbaric people. He gave them sort of these rules and stuff because that's how he could communicate his law. That's usually the apologetic. It doesn't really track in my personal opinion, because how do you deal with the fact that the Bible explicitly says that God does not change, or that his moral standards don't change? So somehow he lowered his standards. Okay, well, maybe he didn't lower his standards, but he was just lowering his rules for them. Anyway, whatever apologetic insert there, we won't go into that because that is what everyone mentions. That's what everyone talks about. Let's jump forward to something that Jesus said directly then. Because when we come to the issue of homosexuality, it is also in the New Testament as well. So it's like, well, I mean, but that, I know it says stone them, but now it just says, you know, they're not to be part of the congregation. They're unclean. They're sinful. And that's in the New Testament as well. So it's not just an Old Testament thing. Okay, well, let's think about something that Jesus said specifically. Matthew chapter 5, 31 and 32, where he's giving sort of these edicts, right? He talks about divorce. And when he talks about divorce, he says it's not lawful for you to divorce unless basically on the case of adultery. So you cannot, if you are being beaten by your husband, if you are in a dangerous situation, you are not allowed to divorce someone if they don't commit adultery or don't confess to committing adultery. So you are scripturally married to that person, and you cannot move on with the rest of your life. You have to stay married to that person. You can't go and find love somewhere else. You can't improve your situation. Are all Christians that are making these claims about homosexuality also following that? And remember, Jesus said that quite specifically. How about another example? What about the scripture right above that one where he talks about if your eye is making you stumble? Or before that, he says, if you look longingly or lustfully at a woman, you have already sinned in your heart. And if your right eye is making you stumble, you should tear it out. It's a little bit interesting how he mentions if your eye is making you stumble, tear it out. And then immediately after that, he says, if your hand's making you stumble, you should cut it off, after he talks about lusting after a woman. I don't think I have to explain really what he's talking about there. Lust for woman, your eyes, and your right hand. I think he made his point very clear. So, to the Christians that are going to bring this up, and again, just hear me out, say, well, but it's in the Bible. It very specifically says, you know, you cannot be a homosexual, blah, blah, blah. Have you ever looked at pornography? Do you currently look at pornography on a regular basis? Do you masturbate? Because if you do, are you any better than the person that you're judging? And if you're trying to apply what people most often do, and saying that, well, he gave different laws and it was a different time back then. Why not do the same thing right now? You could just do the same application that gets you out of slavery being endorsed and okayed by God in the Old Testament, and you say, oh, well, that's a different time back then. Well, now that you're looking at these rules when it comes to homosexuality, couldn't you also say, well, that was a different time back then? You've done it for some things. Why not do it for this? And if you're trying to be pure, ask yourself, am I really pure? Because I would hazard a guess that not very many people are going to pass that test of, it says there, if you marry someone that's been divorced, you've committed adultery. Are we following that rule? If two people get along and they get a divorce, are you following that rule? Have you never masturbated? Are you following that rule? So making separate exceptions for the things that you like or don't like, or the things that make you comfortable or uncomfortable, is not a consistent way to live your life. Again, I can't change your mind. I'm just bringing up something that you could think about. So just think about it. I don't know. This was a little bit of a long-winded rant, but I hope it makes a little bit of sense, because it always is frustrating to hear someone make an exception like, oh, that was for a different time, when they could just do the exact same thing now and say, well, that was a different time. But then anyway, I've already explained myself. With all of that being said, we got one more thing that I want to talk about, and it is a old classic, and that is how much you have to trust the governing body. So let's jump down to paragraphs 10 and 11. The Hebrew Christians would also need to trust those whom Jesus was using to direct the congregation. Those taking the lead likely gave specific instructions to help all in the congregation to follow Jesus' direction at the right time and in an orderly manner. The Greek word used at Hebrews 13:17 for be obedient implies that someone is persuaded to obey because he trusts the person who is giving the direction. That involves more than simply obeying him because he is authorized to give direction. So the Hebrew Christians needed to build trust in those taking the lead before the tribulation began. If during times of peace Christians obediently followed the instructions of those taking the lead, it would be much easier for them to do so in times of crisis. Today, we need faith, as did those who first received Paul's letter. We live at a time when most people reject and even ridicule the Bible's warning about the end of the system of things. Additionally, although the Bible reveals a number of details about how the Great Tribulation will unfold, there are many things we do not know. We need to have strong faith that at the end of this system of things, will come right on time, and that Jehovah will take care of us. We must also strengthen our faith in the channel Jehovah is using today to guide us, the faithful and discreet slave, which is the governing body. When the Great Tribulation begins, we may receive specific life-saving instructions, as the Hebrew Christians may have received when the Romans came. Now is the time to strengthen our trust and confidence in the direction we receive from those taking the lead in Jehovah's organization. We cannot expect to follow their direction confidently during the Great Tribulation if we struggle to follow it now. So this adds a little bit more to my conspiracy. Just the timing of all of this seems a bit odd. Hey, we're going to drop an absolute nuke, something really crazy at the annual meeting. Then the Watchtower is going to come out explaining it in detail. And then after that, you're going to be reminded how much you need to trust in the governing body, because it's just like before the Romans attacked. The Romans surrounded the city and then they left, and that was the time they knew to flee to the mountains. Is there going to be some type of flee to the mountain? We don't really know what the situation's going to be, but I am absolutely curious. But it's funny how they try and put this into a theological and historic context. Hey, this is what Jesus did, this is what the early Christians did, and we're just following that same example. Even though there's no mention of the governing body, even though the early Christian congregation, there were debates about the procedures, different laws, what rules they were going to have. There was a lot of infighting. It wasn't just like, oh, well, everyone just listened to the guys at the top. When you get into the historicity of it, that is not the picture that most Christian scholars would paint. But it is interesting how they just absolutely double down on this. Trust us. God's using us. Just obey us. It makes sense, doesn't make sense. It doesn't really matter. You're too stupid to be able to figure out what's going on anyway. Just listen to guys like Stephen Lett as they rubber face their way through the end times. So a really fascinating set of circumstances, I think, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. We will get back to the convention either tomorrow or day next. With all that being said, stay safe, be kind, and don't forget to show yourself the same kindness that you show to others. And I know you're going to have a good-ass day.